I did the Wild Bill Hickok television show for 7 years, yeah, along with Andy Devine. Also, before the television show, I made 15 feature pictures.
Before his death, Guy Madison, one of Hollywood's Golden Age icons, Guy Madison was one of Hollywood's famous people from the Golden Age, dropped a news that would change the way we think about Tinseltown's past. With his good looks and leading part as Wild Bill Hickok, Madison was the perfect leading man. Madison had a perfect appearance, but she had a secret life that only he knew about. Showed that the star had kept quiet about his relationships with other men for decades in the last few years of his life. There were relationships that were kept secret from the public during a time when being gay was not only looked down upon but actively encouraged. Hollywood tried to hide these connections, but they were more than just personal. They were necessary for Madison's survival. As his job grew, so did his need to hide who he really was. He was brave enough to share the names of some of the most popular actors he had worked with before he died. Since many of them were also living in secret, the reveal was very shocking. Some people found it shocking, while others saw it as proof of what they had been thinking for years. But why did Madison choose now at the end of his life to tell the truth, which turned out to be much more? Madison's problems in the military and afterward were more complicated and far-reaching than anyone could have expected. Hit as the Wild Bill Hickok, Guy Madison was born on January 19, 1922, in Pumpkin Center, California, a small town that is as important to his past as the big places he would later visit. Know that Madison grew up in a simple home away from the big city. His parents were not in Hollywood, and he grew up in a small town. Would lead to the life of a famous movie star, but Madison had a strong drive and sense of purpose that would shape his life later on. While Madison was growing up in California, she became interested in sports and outdoor activities that would later become important to her. Translate into his famous parts as tough guys in westerns and action movies. He wasn't just in the early 1940s, when World War II was just starting. Madison's good looks made him stand out. Being hard on young guys all over the country, and Madison was no different. He started college at the University of California, Berkeley, but as the war got worse, he had to leave. Madison, like a lot of his peers, decided to join the army. His time at Berkeley was short because he answered the call to Madison made a choice that would change the man he would become. He joined the U.S. Army during World War II. He came through the war, which changed the parts he played later on. The service also let him travel and see the world, which changed his view of life and grew his knowledge. When the war was over, Madison went back home, but he was not at all the same person who had left to fight. Hollywood was changing because of World War II, and a new crop of actors was starting to show, and the business world was looking for new people to join. For Guy Madison, the war had been a changing point. Now that Madison was back in normal life, she chose to go into. He made a choice that would take him to the bright lights of Hollywood in the late 1940s. Madison moved to Hollywood to make the most of his fame. With good looks and war experience, getting into the business wasn't easy at first. As simple as he had hoped. The chances were few and the competition was tough. At first, scarce Madison had a hard time getting important parts, often scoring bit parts. Not yet the star he would become, he was given small roles or movies that didn't give him much to work with. Even though it wasn't clear if he would be able to stand out from the other young players, Madison didn't give up. He signed a deal with Warner Brothers, a big studio, in the late 1940s. At the time, this was a big step for Madison because it was the first time he had in getting an official deal with a company gave him the support and attention he needed, but even with this help, the beginning of his time at Warner Brothers wasn't easy. The contract gave him some security, but it didn't instantly help him. Resulted in leading parts. Madison was still having a hard time figuring out how to work in Hollywood at this point. He didn't have an easy road to fame. He had to deal with problems that many Hollywood stars do. Rejection, disappointment, and a string of unremarkable parts, but even though the movie got off to a slow start, his natural charm and screen personality stood out. He was able to build his resume, gain experience, and most importantly get the attention of Warner Brothers while he worked there. There were producers who helped Guy Madison get his start in the business while he was signed with Warner Brothers, but that wasn't all. Like many young artists in the late 1940s, he didn't have a smooth ride. Working his way up in a business that usually went to big names, the beginning of his career were filled with small parts that didn't always show off his full ability. It was easy to think that getting a contract with a big company would make an actor famous right away, but that wasn't the case. More difficult, many actors, including Madison, had to show their worth over and over again before they were cast. While Madison was getting parts that would make her famous, bigger names often stole the show in her early roles. At Warner Brothers, he was in a string of movies that didn't do very well, which left him feeling down. It was normal for actors in Hollywood to be unsure about their futures. If you were Madison, it would be easy to give up because the competition was tough and there was always pressure to do well. Even though there were problems and setbacks, Madison's resolve and determination kept him going forward. At the time, one of the hardest things about getting into Hollywood was that artists didn't have much say over in the late 1940s. Many stars were bound by tight contracts with they often didn't have much say over the parts they played because they worked in studios. This lack of creative freedom was always hard for Madison, who, despite being good-looking and smart, to work his way through a system that didn't always see his possible affairs and marriages. The attention that Hollywood paid to Guy Madison's personal life made his rise to fame in Hollywood nothing short of it's amazing that after years of struggling in small parts, he became a household name thanks to his performance in of Wild Bill Hickok in the popular TV show Wild Bill Hickok. But Madison's job wasn't the only thing that was important in his daily life. Throughout his life, his partnerships were also in the news, often more than his work. Madison's image as a playboy in the late 1950s and early 1960s became a big part of his public image because of his ties with his personal life often got more attention from the media than his acting work. He was with several women. Being a Hollywood star was fun, but it also came with its own problems. Controversies, especially when it came to balancing the demands of a job with the allure of love and the attention of the public. Madison was married 3 times, and each marriage had its own story. His first marriage to actress was full of love, sadness, and sometimes public scandal. It's possible that Gail Russell is the most well-known because she met John Wayne while making The Night of the Grizzly in 1966. At the same time, Russell was having her own problems in Hollywood, and the marriage brought her. Even though they brought Madison some happiness, they also brought her problems, like the stress of being in a public relationship. Russell was known for having bad mental health when she was in the public eye. There were a lot of problems in their relationship, which shaped Madison's personal life. Because of the stress of his job and the strain of his relationships, the couple's marriage ended in divorce, but Madison will always remember the time they spent together. Madison got married a second time after his first marriage ended, but the details of this marriage are not known. Relationship aren't as well known because it wasn't as promoted as his first one. His second wife, whose name is still a bit of a mystery, wasn't as well known as Madison or his first wife. But the marriage ended in divorce, just like his first. Even though the connection wasn't as public, it still added to the story of Madison's personal life, which kept people interested. Finally, Madison's third marriage was to Patricia Hardy, used to be a model and actor. She had her own business in Hollywood, but not as well known as her husband. The two of them seemed to go well together. To get their personal lives back on track after Madison's previous relationships, they had kids together, and for a while it looked like Madison was having a calmer, more settled life. While they were married, there were some problems, and in the end, the couple got a divorce. In his relationships, Madison's image as a playboy kept following him. People were very interested in his love life, and tabloids were full of stories about his affairs and relationships. As important to him as his job, it seemed like his personal relationships were being looked at more closely than his work, and the conflict between his private and public life. Even though there were problems with him, he must have saved a lot of lives. In her personal life, Madison was able to keep up a successful job in Hollywood thanks to her rugged good looks, and he stayed a famous actor in both movies and TV shows thanks to his charisma on screen. Still, there was a fine line between his personal problems and his work successes, and the public often seemed to be more interested in his love life than in his acts. In addition to Madison's relationships with different women were often the focus of the media because she was a star who drew a lot of attention. The press followed Madison everywhere he went. People were always looking at his love life, which made it hard for him to focus on just his work. His charm and his good looks meant that women were always interested in him, but the ongoing pressure to live up to the Playboy picture probably had an effect on his sense of who he was, both on and off screen. By the early 1950s, Guy Madison had gone from being Wild Bill Hickok to a Hollywood Western star. His way into the hearts of TV viewers and made him one of the most famous Western stars of all time. His big break came with the famous TV show Wild Bill Hickok, which when it debuted in 1951 and ran until 1958, the show was a huge hit and solidified in the Western genre. Madison was known as the main man. Wild Bill Hickok was at the time, it was a new show that played on people's love of Westerns. Guy Madison played as the main character. Wild Bill Hickok was a famous lawman and gunfighter of the Old West. He played Wild Bill Hickok with charm and toughness that Madison's performance as the show's star quickly won him fans and helped make Wild Bill Hickok one of the most famous TV shows of the 1950s. The show's popularity wasn't just due to his rise to fame, sealed his place in Hollywood and started his long-lasting fame in the Western genre. Madison became a famous Western entertainer after Wild Bill Hickok. He is often mentioned with other well-known stars in the field, like James Arnes and Richard Boone. 3 stars, often called the Big Three, ruled the Western movie scene, both big and small. Madison is on screens because of his good looks, strong screen personality, and way of the role of the brave but tough police officer was seen as a perfect fit for the genre. The figure Wild Bill Hickok was brave and honest, which made him a hero to many. It had a lot of fans and became a sign of the American West in the 1950s. Madison became even more known after Wild Bill Hickok opened the door for an even wider range of possibilities in film and TV. In addition to Madison worked on the series and was in a lot of movies in the 1990s. When he was in 1966, one of his most famous movie roles, Night of the Grizzly, a Western that showed how well he could switch from TV shows to movies, the movie was a big hit, and Madison was able to. Madison's ability to play a variety of roles was meant to help him grow as an actress. Clear when he went from TV to movies, which is something that not all players were able to do well. Many TV stars had trouble getting started in movies, but Madison's career was marked by a few hits. Parts, mostly in Western movies, that let him keep showing off the qualities for which he was known. His part as a tough, heroic man on screen in The Last Challenge 1967 added to his reputation as a major player in the Western genre. Madison did have some success in movies, but it never quite hit the heights of his TV fame. Helped him get work in movies and TV shows throughout the 1960s, but none of his roles after Wild Bill. The parts that Hickok played were just as popular with a lot of people. Even so, he continued to make important advances to westerns during this time, and he was still Madison was a reliable figure in the genre, and he also made movie roles. Made guest roles on a number of other TV shows in the 1950s and back in the 1960s. He was in famous TV shows like The Virginia and Gunsmoke, most prestigious Western shows at the time. These special roles kept Madison in the public eye and he used these parts to show how versatile he was, and his appearances on these shows cemented his reputation as a Western fame, solidifying his place in the history of TV even more as the 1960s TV and movies started to change the Western environment. As time went on, the decade-long heyday of this genre started to fade as people started to discover new works in it. This change in taste made things harder because people were drawn to new kinds of stories. It was great for artists like Madison who made their name playing strong silent Western types. Even though Madison kept working in movies and TV shows, his job path wasn't as clear as it used to be. In the height of the Wild Bill Hickok Guy Madison's Cold War controversies, Hollywood-type hiring problems as Guy Madison's fame grew through the roof by the 1950s and 1960s, his personal life was getting just as much attention. His acting work, especially his parts in westerns and TV shows, got a lot of attention. Had made him a major star in Hollywood. Madison's life outside of work as the 1960s went on, being in the spotlight was anything but normal. Several parts of his personal life would be looked at closely by the media and the people. One of the most important problems Madison had to deal with at this time was a political one. The 1960s were the height of the Cold War, a time when emotions were high. America and the Soviet Union were at war with each other, and Hollywood was full of movies about this time. There were political accusations, and a lot of artists, directors, and writers were said to support communism. Guy Madison, like many others in the business, found himself under the influence of left-wing ideas. Because of the people he hung out with, but Madison himself was never. He was directly accused of being a communist and taking part in any politically subversive actions he did. Many rumors about him because he was linked to some people who freely supported leftist causes and people in Hollywood who knew him and were friends with some progressives made people think he might have been open to communist ideas, especially given the state of politics at the time. It's important to note that there was neither strong proof nor specific allegations to back up these claims. Keep in mind that Madison was never officially investigated or charged with anything that could have hurt his career. Despite these rumors, Madison was able to keep her good image. He didn't have to deal with any direct political consequences, unlike some of his peers who were blacklisted or had to appear before the House Un-American Activities Committee. These events did not have a big effect on Madison's career. Despite political scandals, his professional image stayed mostly the same. Madison lived in a time when politics were becoming more and more tense and suspicious, so it's possible that he was smart about how he dealt with these rumors, which kept his job from getting seriously hurt. Personal life may have been able to avoid long-lasting political fallout in the 1960s. Saw another problem with his job that wouldn't go away by the time when the 1960s came around. Madison was known for playing strong women. He became famous for playing Wild Bill Hickok on the TV show The Adventures of Wild Montana. Bill Hickok said that this kind of casting had two sides. His fame and made him a common name, but it started to make it harder for him to take on in the 1950s and 1960s. Many actors had trouble getting more varied or complicated parts in Hollywood movies. 1960s, especially for people who became known for a certain type of movie, like Western stars who became known for actors who played tough, heroic parts, often found it hard to break out of those roles and show their range. Worked for Madison because his role as Wild Bill Hickok put him in a certain box as the classic Western hero, and as the genre grew in fame, it became it's getting harder and harder for him to switch to other types of jobs. Some reviewers pointed out that Madison's ability to show off his range of skills was his fame as a Western star held him back, even though he had found great success in the genre, but that same popularity also got in the way of his Madison's image as a rough-and-tumble noble law man made it hard for him to advance in his job. He would have to play a different character or have more complex character development for parts like these to be considered. Ultimately, casting rules limited his chances in Hollywood, especially as the movie business began to accept new genres and more nuanced acts show how hard it is for Madison. Due to drinking, his career fell apart, and he played small parts in movies in the 1970s and 1980s. In the 1970s, Guy Madison, who had been a huge star in Hollywood, began to see his career fall apart because the business had changed and people were no longer interested in the kinds of parts he had played. His work in the Western genre, which made him famous, there were new trends in both movies and TV shows, and his fame was starting to fade. Madison was having a hard time finding his feet. This time in his life would be marked by efforts to make changes into different types of music and professional problems that would finally overshadow the successes of his earlier work in the 1970s. Madison's playing career lost the steam it had once had. Despite being known for playing the lead in westerns and for parts in movies like The Adventures of Wild Bill Hickok, people's desire for westerns started to fade with the rise of Hollywood. Madison found that she liked gritty, realistic stories and the rise of new stars more. He tried to broaden his career when he was having trouble getting significant roles, but these efforts didn't work out. Mostly failed, and his acting, which was once seen as iconic in the Western genre, now seemed Madison was out of touch with how moviegoers' tastes were changing, but he did try an attempt at other styles in the hopes of reviving his career in a business that is changing. Even though he tried hard, he couldn't get away from the image of Wild Bill Hickok that had made him famous. He tried to switch to different types of writing, like action or drama, but it didn't work. Not be the big hit he had hoped for in his former role as a Western hero remained a big problem for getting more varied parts, many critics said. And fans still saw him through the lens of his earlier work, which made him less powerful. Ability to explore new areas in Hollywood, as if his work problems weren't hard enough already. It wasn't enough that Madison was also having personal problems at this time. That his drinking started to affect his home life and then his work life as well, even though his problems weren't publicly known in the 1970s, they did hurt his career in ways like many artists of his time. Madison was under a lot of stress, which hurt his mental health. He turned to alcohol as a way to deal with it. Having to deal with the stress of his failing job and personal setbacks, these problems, while not at the time, it was widely reported on events that would later become part of his own story and help him decide to go on vacation. Though he stayed out of the public eye, he wasn't completely missing from the entertainment world in the